Show the age. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Namaduhu nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. Amma ba'd. In the name of my Creator, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. I'm thankful to my aunt, Mrs. Jessima Ismail, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. I'm also thankful to the panelists, starting with Sister former Minister Ferial Ashraf, Latif Farooq and Asif Hussain. I'm sure after Mr. Farooq's journey into history, and then of course when Asif was speaking, I found that all the ladies were grinning, because I thought they were very happy that we own all what Sri Lanka has now. Everything is ours. And I'm also happy that we have a fair share of the audience which belongs to our generation. Why I say that is that, okay, today I got the age. I am 62 years old, right? And I believe that this generation has a duty by the future generation to really place our community in the right perspective. Where should we be? Do we parade ourselves as Muslims? Or do we call ourselves Sri Lankans who believe in the Muslim faith or the Islamic faith? That's the question before our future generation. And I think the start to that were the two contributions made by Mr. Farooq and Hussain. And the two reactions were different. I was watching. There was a question mark when Mr. Farooq was speaking. Because that's history. And then when our contributions, when we are boasting about our contributions, we were all smiling. Oh, right. That's the problem. So I thought I should stir the pot a little, because that's what I would like to do. And before that, I think I need to do a little dig into who I am, so that you understand why I am speaking the way I am speaking. My father happened to be a member of parliament. My uncle turned father-in-law was also a member of parliament. My grand-uncle was a member of parliament. So we come from a family that has been in public life. And my cousin Ashraf himself was a parliamentarian. And Sister Ferial, she wants to make special mention. We all happened, so she happened to come on board. So, why I say this is, way back in 1962, when my father was a member of parliament and my father-in-law was a member of parliament, two of my cousins and I were fortunate to gain entrance to St. Thomas's Prep School, Bandara. That was a British school at that time, typical English school. And we went there without knowing our alphabets. I remember my father standing on the other side of the half parapet wall and spelling BAT, and I would say BAT right, and that's how I got through the entrance exam. Right? And the environment in that school changed us so much that by the third year, when we were in grade 5, we were thinking in English and struggling to write in Tamil, which was my mother tongue. I went to church every day. I was a chorister. I was a soloist. In fact, in 1965, at Christ Church, Christmas Eve, I was a soloist. I was on air. And my father was very proud of it. Right? But that didn't make me a Christian. That only enriched my values. Now, this is what we need to pass down to the future generation. Why are we proud of being Sri Lankans? Why do we always want to show that this country is not ours, that we are aliens, that we are being persecuted, that we are not being treated properly? Now, this is what we need to think about, and this is what I thought I should be saying. Because we used to have long conversations with my aunt, and finally she ends up saying my favorite nephew. Because I love to talk and she loves to listen.
She loves to talk too.
And maybe it runs in the family. So, this, now I have been in Parliament for 2 years, and I used to always make sure that Sister Ferial she was on the government side, I was on the opposing side, but she would sit and patiently listen to me bragging. But what we did there was to ensure that our position as Sri Lankans was recorded. Why do we think differently? Why do we look at things differently? This is something that we have to cultivate in the future generation. Like when Asif was showing all those things. Now, if we are, to put it positively, we should be saying, look, we have enriched the culture of this country. But our coming has, brought all these things. But if we say, then it takes a different tone. That's where the problem is. We want to prove that we are right and somebody is wrong. Now I take a different approach. Our faith is the last revealed religion. The last revealed religion, and we are fortunate that we are following that faith. So I would, in local parlance, I would say we are MBA holders in religion. Others have also followed religions. They have also learnt on the way. But they have stopped. Some have stopped at kindergarten, some have stopped at O-level, some have stopped at A-level, but we are MBA holders. So what are MBA holders supposed to do? Interpret what the degree holder has in a different way. MBA doesn't teach you anything differently. It only teaches you to present what you know in a different context. Are we doing that? If we are MBA holders, and if our religion is the perfect religion, are we showing it in such a way that the others follow us? This is where we fail. Because I firmly believe that one's plight is the direct result of one's choices. If we are being hated in this country today, if we are being persecuted, it's because of us, of what we have been doing. There is no point in blaming somebody else. Why don't we ask ourselves, what is it that we did that brought about this? I recently was reading an article written by Hilmi, I think he's gone. Very well presented about the stoning of the maid. We don't have to feel shy about it. Because like I said, we are the followers of the religion that is revealed the last. There have been no religion after that. But why is it that we always want to play the role of a victim. I am one who has been involved in conflict resolution for quite some time. In fact, that's how I got dragged into the SLMC, because I was a part of the Constitutional Council. And so I read this. There is a famous author on conflict resolution called John Paul Lederach, and he had written about the situation in northern Ghana in the year 1990, where there was rising escalation of ethnic violence between Muslims and Christians. Right? I'll just read that. The violence between the Konkombas, a very dispersed tribe of people who were merely farmers, and the Dagombas, who had sustained and powerful tradition of chieftaincy, had a social and leadership structure that loaned itself to negotiations with the European slave traders, which went back to the era of slavery. Ghana gained independence and the country moved towards democracy based on elections. The existence of this animosity was exploited by the politicians at every election, and violence erupted very often. The Konkombas became Christians and started raising their social status through education. When moves were made at resolving the conflict, a meeting was arranged between both parties. The Dagomba chief arrived in full regalia with his entourage. The Konkombas, of course, were represented by the younger generation who had benefited from education. As soon as the meeting started, the Dagomba chief berated the delegations, saying, "Look at them. Who are they, that I should even be in this room with them? Who am I to talk to? They are people with nothing, who have come from the fields, and they could have at least brought an old man. They are just boys born yesterday." The atmosphere was devastating. The custom was that no one ever crossed a chief. The Konkomba spokesman asked to respond, and turning to the chief said, "You are perfectly right, father. We do not have a chief. We have not had one for years. You will not recognize the man we have chosen to be our chief. And this has been our problem. The reason we react and the reason our people go on rampages arises from this fact. We do not have what you have. It is really not about the town or the land or the market guinea fowl. I beg you, listen to my words. Father, I am calling you father because we do not wish to disrespect you. You are a great chief, but what is left to us? Do we have no other means but the violence to receive in return the one thing we seek? To be respected and to establish our own chief, who could indeed speak with you, rather than have a young boy do it on our behalf." The attitude, the tone of voice, and the use of the word father spoken by the Konkomba man apparently so affected the chief that he sat for a moment without response. When finally he spoke, he did so with a changed voice. Addressing himself to the young man rather than the mediators, he said, "I came to put you people in your place, but now I feel only shame. Though I insulted you people, you still call me father. It is you who speaks with wisdom, and me who has seen the truth. We who are chiefs have always looked down on you, because you have no chief. But we have not understood the denigration you suffered. I beg you, my son, to forgive me." At this point, the young Konkomba man stood up and walked to the chief, knelt down and held his lower leg in reverence and said, "Now," a word of affirmation and acceptance. I am sure if you relate this story to where we are today, you would have a very clear message. These things, when we read, we need to put it in our context and see how does it apply to us. Because assimilation, integration or separation, right? We have gained tremendously being born in this land. We can't deny that. Right? Enjoying a great sense of religious freedom that can be hardly found in other countries. Have had the free space to prosper, enriched by secular education and different cultures. Do we hold on to this uniqueness, or do we drift towards the fundamentalist trend that is now emerging due to the many years of conflict, poor leadership and global trends? That's again a choice we have to make and live with its consequences. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 143, has defined the role for us as Muslims. He has said, "And it is thus we appointed you to be the community of the middle way." And it is thus that we appointed you to be the community of the middle way, justly balanced, so that you might be witnesses before mankind, and the messenger might be a witness before you. Right? So, we remain caught in the middle. Actually, we remain caught in the middle, and our political leadership has not been successful in articulating its position in a manner independent of the two nationalism dominant in this country. This is not an accusation on the politicians, but on all of us. It's an indictment on all of us. Because damaged relationships are like a one-way street. It's easy to go down one, but it's very hard to get it back. You can't get back. So, I feel that we all need to accept the fact that we are all Sri Lankans first, and thereafter whatever we want to call ourselves. Because for me, religion is something very personal to me. Because I will be rewarded or punished for my actions. So I cannot or will not go around saying that I am better than you. I am this because I am this. I went to church, I sang carols, but I didn't become a Christian because for me, by conviction, I follow my religion, which is something which has graduated from Christianity. Islam encompasses all the religions. We don't contradict anything. So why is it that we are being persecuted? Why is it that we are being looked at differently? Is it because others have got their eyes colored, or is it because of our actions? I read recently, my 5-minute board hasn't come, so I can talk a little. The Bengali poet and writer Pramata Chowdhury more than 80 years ago said, I quote, "To love a country means to love its people. Because human beings love other human beings. If there is someone who loves not humans but the soil, then we can conclude that he is no human but a slab of inanimate matter. Science, after all, has discovered a law under which matter attracts matter inexorably and blindly. A Bengali is akin to another Bengali because in the field of mind, the link of language is like a link of blood. When I speak to my Tamil or Sinhalese brothers, I always say I am a proud Sri Lankan because I carry Sinhalese blood, I carry Tamil blood. I can't deny that. I know part of my ancestry came from Uva Kandyan descent, another came from the coastline of the east. So I carry both blood. I am a Sri Lankan. You know, one thing that touched me during this halal crisis, I have a planter friend of mine he was childhood friends. Now he is a senior planter, and when I want to hide, there is no telephone reception in his bungalow, so I drive to Navalapiti and get into his bungalow. Now he is a staunch Buddhist. He has a shrine room, and you know, I make fun out of him, saying, "Bara pintura dakkot tamai Budurajanan vanse gana hitane." Right? Then so one day we were having dinner. I had taken my wife along. We were having dinner. There was chicken on the table, and we're talking. And the father, 89 years old, he walked in. He said, "Puta, දැන් බලන්න මේ රටේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නේ. මේ අනවශ්‍ය ප්‍රශ්නනේ." And you know, in Sinhalese, in his thing, දැන් බලන්න මගේ පුතා බෞද්ධයෙක්. ඔයා මුස්ලිම් ආගම. දැන් මේ මේසේ තියෙනවා කුකුල් මස්. ඔයා මගේ පුතාගෙන් ඇහුවද මේක හලාල්ද හරාම්ද කියලා? නෑනේ. ඇයි? ඔයාට විශ්වාසයක් තිබුණා මගේ පුතා ඔයාට කන්න දෙනවා නම් මුස්ලිම් කඩෙන් තමයි ගේන්නේ කියලා. අර විශ්වාසයක් තිබුණා. ඒකින්ද අහන්නේ. මගේ පුතත් වෙන කඩ වලින් ගේන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ කාලේ අපේ ගමේ හිටියා මුදලාලිලා, හාජියාලා. ඒගොල්ලන් තමයි ගමේ කෝකටත් අයිලේ. ඉස්පිරිතාලේ යන්න වුණොත් මුදලාලිගේ කාර් එක. ගනුදෙනු කරන්නත් ඉස්සල්ලාම කරන්නේ මුදලාලිත් එක්ක. ණයක් ඕන වුණොත් මුදලාලිගෙන් ගන්න. අපේ උත්සවවල වලට ඉස්සල්ලාම ගෙනල්ලා තියන්නේ මුදලාලි වල. ඇයි? අර ගමේ මිනිසුන්ට මුදලාලි ගැන තිබුණ විශ්වාසය. හැබැයි දැන් ඒ ගමේම ඒ ගේම මුදලාලිගේ ළමයි ඉන්නවා. අපිට අඳුර ගන්න බෑ. ලොකු දුවවයි පොඩි දුවවයි වෙනසක් පේන්නේ නැහැ. පුතා සෞදි අරේබියා ගිහිල්ලා වගේ ඇවිල්ලා වගේ. දැන් ඒ විශ්වාසය නැහැ, කැඩිලා. දැන් මොන හරි වුණොත් අපි බය වෙනවා මුදලාලිගේ පවුලට මොන හරි වෙයිද කියලා. That same family that had prominence, which was the center, which was the nucleus, the core of the village, becomes the target of the village. Okay, I think I am taking too much time. I have my sister impatiently waiting to finish and run off. So, you know, I don't know how many of you read this, but I am reading this article that I saw in the Daily Mirror of the 17th of August. Sri Lanka, an identity in crisis, written by one Dr. Mahesh Rajasurya, senior lecturer in psychiatry. Right? I'm reading this because it struck me that, you know, this is something that I collect all these things. Fortunately, we have a country called Sri Lanka. What are our dreams for and about the future of Sri Lanka as Sri Lankans? These dreams, or the need to have such dreams, essentially binds all of us as a nation despite whatever differences we have. Just like an American nation or an Indian nation, which are powerful nations, despite differences in skin color or languages. Let us dream together. Let us talk to each other. Let us listen to all opinions. That is, if we want a better Sri Lanka. And let us continue to make Sri Lanka a better country each day while we take pride in its children. A few observations recently dampened my ability to dream. Alas, some of them are not really just recent happenings, but they were brought to my consciousness by other observations. I interacted with a group of adolescents and none of them had heard the word Tibiri Gedara, birthing room, which also means origin. All of them were native Sinhala speakers. I asked a few young and not so native Tamil speakers what music stations they listen to. I also asked them what percentage of original Sri Lankan Tamil songs were played by these stations. They replied 0. Recently, a group of young boys were reported to be supporting Pakistan cricket team in a cricket match played in Colombo, who were Muslims living in Colombo, Sri Lanka. A friend told me that 9 out of 10 young people working with him want to leave Sri Lanka as early as they can get away and live in another country. What is it that has led to a situation that our Sinhala children have never heard such a beautiful term as Tibiri Gedara? Who made our Tamil children enjoy exclusively Tamil Indian songs and not a single Sri Lankan Tamil song? How have our Muslim youth learned to support Pakistan when they play against our own country in a cricket match? Why do they want to leave this country en masse? What has gone wrong? Probably the answer lies in the very basic concept of self. Where has our identity gone? Who are we? What makes us Sri Lankans? What binds us to the motherland? What is our identity? When two strangers meet in the Western world, they ask each other's names to get to know each other. And then the introduction is complete. In Sri Lanka, the first question we ask each other is not the name, but where one is from. It goes something like this. I guess it will be another 10 minutes before the session starts. Yes, we might have to wait. Well, so, where are you from? Kalutara Station Road. Ah, really? I have a friend there. Actually, a distant relative, a former Grama Nilidhari. I am not sure. Do they live in an old house with big gate posts? Yes, that's the house. Oh, I know them. Well, they are relatives too. Really? And so it goes on and on. We make multiple connections with people through one's village. Also, through the people one knows or we are related to, because our self-concept is so complicated. It is not just your body and name as in the Western world. It is our whole being, including our village and where we are born. In the Western world, asking where one was born, what one's village is, considered impolite. It is considered an intrusion of one's privacy. I am not making a judgment that one is superior to another. What I am saying is that it is just the difference we need to look at. The self-concept is fundamental to one's identity, and there are fundamental differences in the identity of us Sri Lankans. Let us look at another story. This is why I came to this article. I don't know how many of you know this, but it struck a note. The story of Abdul Majid, which I learned from former GA Sunil Kannanga, right? He is writing. Abdul Majid lived in Pothwil, in the eastern coast of Sri Lanka. His house was on the land which is now currently occupied by Muhudu Mahavihara. There is no temple or ruins. There was no temple or any ruins at that time. When Abdul Majid was digging in his front yard to build a temporary hut for a family occasion in 1960s, he found the head of a Buddha statue. He could have just covered that hole and dug another hole and continued with his life as usual. Abdul Majid was a Sri Lankan and was proud to be a Sri Lankan. So he decided to inform the authorities, knowing very well he would soon have to disown his house and land. And he did just that. The Department of Archaeology uncovered many ancient ruins in the area and demarcated a designated archaeological site. Abdul Majid and many other Muslims lost their lands to this site. Many were compensated financially, but not Abdul Majid. The amazing thing was that he refused to take money. His attitude was, I am handing back this important piece of land to my motherland. So how can I take money? The archaeological department officers couldn't figure out how to react to this great Sri Lankan's magnanimous decision. Eventually, they did react. What they did was to offer the newly created post of keeper of the Mudu Mahavihara archaeological site to Abdul Majid. He accepted and carefully guarded this ancient piece of motherland till his death. Then the post was passed on to his son A.M. Wahab. That is how Mudu Mahavihara happened to be guarded by a Muslim, son of a great Sri Lankan. It is time to find more Abdul Majids. Where have all the Sri Lankans who love their motherland gone? Are they right here? Go and look in the mirror. The challenge right in front of us at the moment is to create more and more Sri Lankans like Abdul Majid. We can do this from the next generation who feel nice little nuances of their mother tongue like Tibiri Gedara foreign. The challenge is to reroute our next generation to support and cheer Sri Lanka while rejoicing her true victories beyond cricket match victories. The challenge is to create and enrich a truly Sri Lankan Tamil culture and a Muslim culture so that there would be great Sri Lankan Tamil songs for people to enjoy. The challenge is to get our young and old citizens to realize what a great country we have compared to most other countries in the world. Who will face these challenges? Again, we only need to look in the mirror. Thank you.